Let me start with you, Brian, because, of course, the latest that we've heard is as we continue to watch for any intervention coming from authorities, that we might potentially see, that we have already seen a new currency chief, and that would be Atsushi Mimura. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, let me just say, okay, first of all, Shery, I mean, this is obviously a very dramatic time to be making a change at that position, but it's part of normal rotations. And the one thing you can bet on is we will see continuity. The scripts that the MOF officials deliver are always meticulously prepared, and you'll notice on days when we have Suzuki and Kanda speaking on the same day, they always convey the exact same amount of urgency, whether it's something simple like we are watching currency markets regularly, or more dramatic, more urgent, we are ready to take steps as necessary. So that won't change. The one thing that does change is there is communication involved with the media, and having seen dozens of vice finance ministers come and go in my time, I mean, I can say they're all the cream of the crop. They're all fantastic. They've got great English. They know everything about the world and the financial markets. But charisma is a thing, and Kanda had a degree of charisma that reminds me of something we haven't really seen since the days of Eisuke Sakakibara. I mean, a real...
Mr. Yen, as he's been dubbed.
A power over, the timing is always exquisite, the way they deliver their communications. So that's something to watch. We'll have to see just what Mr. Mimura looks like when he starts talking with the press on a regular basis.
I gotta say, though, despite the charisma, I mean, that hasn't really necessarily worked in the last few months. We saw what happened last week as well. He was talking about intervening for 24 hours, and then the yen just didn't budge. But Taro, that's led to some different dynamics across the Japanese economy, including prices now continuing to rise.
Right, absolutely. So BOJ's stance was they don't care about the levels of the yen, but the yen is kept in that weakness so high that that will be something that the BOJ can't ignore. And I think the weaker yen is make their guards up about inflation overshooting. And obviously the Tokyo CPI Friday suggests that inflation is going in the BOJ's direction. So I think those readings are kind of opening the gates for the BOJ for its another hike in July in my reading. Yeah.
So why hasn't the government intervened so far, Brian? Because we have seen, of course, as Taro says, very weak levels. Is it the gradual decline that's really keeping authorities at bay?
Yeah, I mean, part of it's the pace of the move, so that's definitely something they're watching closely. And it's also, I mean, they're looking at, everything, the macro environment, and they can't fight the Fed. The main factor that's pushing the dollar up, and it's up not just against the yen, but up against all the other currencies as well, is Fed interest rates. So Japan has to kind of time its moves and really, make the most of its efforts. It doesn't want to intervene at a time when it's just going to be pushing against a string, so to speak. So we're still on standby anytime, and we're watching closely, and I think it's just a matter of seeing how the market is positioned on any day.
Taro, what's your outlook for the yen as we head into a new quarter? Because part of the moves and that weakness we've seen in the Japanese yen have also been attributed to funding needs for the dollar at the quarter end, rebalancing of portfolios, especially given the US PCE reading on Friday. Do you see that pressure being eased a little bit in the coming couple of weeks?
It's really hard to say because the recent weekend is mostly about the speculative pressure. People say carry trade is about fundamentals, but to my eyes, the carry trade is also mostly speculative because it try to retain not only the rate differentials, but also it actually targets the capital gains. So therefore, as long as those capital speculative pressure goes on, the dollar yen could blow it to anyway. That said, I think the Japanese investors are seeking the time for repatriation. That will not be a strong game changer, but somehow a supportive factor for the yen, I think.
Taro, we have the Japan Tankan Business Sentiment Survey coming out within the hour. It's been interesting talking to these CEOs because even exporters who benefit from a weaker yen are feeling a bit more cautious when it comes to this much weakness.
Right, absolutely. Obviously, like even the importers, even the exporters procure by imports because, like, the Japan is lack of resources, and they generally so that's why I think their message is kind of weakness of yen probably went over that sort of threshold for the profit, and also obviously for, let's say, for the car makers, if the consumer confidence is declining, that makes worse for their domestic businesses as well. So that's why I think they're alerting to the weaker yen. For the tanka, I think the inflation-related gauges are must-watch. Whether particularly the service providers are still willing to raise prices, and also the corporates' inflation expectations are one of the most important gauges for the BOJ to watch the inflation expectations. If it's kept around 2%, it's like another go for BOJ's hike in July.
Brian, what are your expectations as well for that survey and the type of confidence we're expecting to see from businesses?
Well, I mean, we're prepared for all possibilities, but we expect to see the Tankan sentiment broadly holding steady across all sectors. You'll remember that the services sector, we were at the highest in decades before, so we'll be watching that closely to see if that is maintained. We expect manufacturers to kind of come in about where they were, which is, as Taro said, I mean, it's broadly should be supportive for the BOJ to certainly consider and possibly execute a rate hike at the end of this month. We'll also be looking at CapEx. We expect CapEx figures for this fiscal year to be revised up into the double digits, somewhere around the 13-12% range. That'll be a big sign of positive sign for the BOJ in terms of the virtuous economic cycle that it's been pursuing.